This presentation is focused on amendment. As I said, of course, this does not replace the presentation that you will have on the 24th. That will complement, that will be more on when do we need to request an amendment, what is a minor deviation, what is the simplified approval procedure. All that you will hear in detail during the 24th presentation. There is a specific session on amendment, termination and suspension. Next slide. So this presentation is really when you know that you have to request an amendment. So that the deviation is somehow linked to either the grant agreement data sheet, that's a specific part in your grant agreement that you should be familiar with it because you just signed the grant agreement, where you have the duration, you have the amounts, you have the co-funding rate, you have the reporting period set there as well. You have also a different element there that if those elements are modified, it leads to an amendment. One thing as well is that, for example, and we said that already, if you have a change in your entity, for example, a legal change, you change the address, for example, all this must be communicated to to SINEA or to the Commission, to the EU, but this does not require an amendment requested by you. It's directly via the participant portal, participant register portal, that you change, and it will be one of the amendments, but we will only be informed. It will be an information procedures. So SINEA do not have anything to do there. It's really between the central services validation that you have been interacting with during the gap, and you as entity that the communication will be, and we will see it in the system, the outcome of that. So this presentation is really, as I said, on this specific amendment where you will change something. For example, one beneficiary is going out and you need to have a new one. Next slide. So the amendment, as everything in the grant management service, the funding internal portal, is paperless. So you have a flow, a workflow directly in the system. It's endorsed with e-signature. As we said, you can ask and we will assess, we can accept or reject. You can also cancel the amendment if you haven't submitted it, or you can withdraw it as long as we haven't signed it. If SINEA has signed an amendment, the things are sealed, and actually the grant agreement has been modified and you can't withdraw. It would require a new amendment. When you submit your amendment, when you submit it, actually, not when you launch it, there is 45 days for us to assess it. Of course, we can extend that deadline if we have some issues, but usually we try to bound with this for 45 days. Next slide. So you heard a lot about the monitoring. So monitoring expert, the external monitoring. Why? Because actually they are here to support. They are here to screen your deviations, if I may say. So in a large scale, I already said that there are some deviations we know, like for example, change of partnership. We know it is an amendment, but even there, it's important that you contact your monitor via the monitoring help desk, and you will here be, or if you are a partner, you have to contact the coordinating beneficiary first, of course. If you are not the coordinating beneficiary and you don't want to work anymore on the project, of course, you have to deal first within the consortium and explain that. And there, the coordinating beneficiary contact the monitoring help desk. First, it's important that we are collectively informed about that. And then we will also, in some complex amendment, they will guide you towards the preparation of that amendment, guide you both outside the system and in the system. So it's really beneficial for you to inform as soon as you have something to a deviation to communicate to us. And maybe I will skip that, but this is a bit of a list of things that you will have to think, because some changes requires action before the amendment is able to be even submitted by you. Like, for example, if you have a new beneficiary, I mean, you have to have this beneficiary already validated by the central services before he can sign. He can sign his accession form and his declaration of owner. You will have a specific presentation on that. Next slide. So the amendment is in 3 steps. So you have the preparation where you know that you have to do an amendment. So therefore you launch it. This is few clicks. You will see it's very quick actually. The big part is the preparation, where you compose your amendment, and the IT system helps you a lot. And when you have to have this interaction with CINEA, for us to tell you, okay, you can submit it. So, and then you submit it, and it's out of your hand unless you want to withdraw. Next slide. So this, you log in. Next slide. You go to my project, you select your project, you go to my next slide. Manage project, next slide. And you land in what is now very known to you, the grant management service. And there, as you see here, you have the continuous reporting, as we said just before, this is there. And here you have already an amendment which has been launched because you have the consortium requested amendment launch. Next slide. So how you launch that? You launch by clicking on the plus, launch new interaction with the EU. Next slide. And this is what you get. You have the first possibility is to request an amendment. You can start from scratch, meaning that you can start from the latest legal data that is in your system. The legal data is the one that either you just have now because you have just finished the gap, and this is the, let's say, the initial data, or if you had a previous amendment, it will be that one, which will be the latest legal data. But the system allows you also to reuse some of the changes that you have done before. If, for example, we rejected an amendment that you requested, for example, I just give an example that I will use all the time. You asked for 48 months of delay, but you did not really justify why, okay? And we are not convinced this is really what we should accept. So basically, we reject that. I will explain that later on. But okay, it's rejected. So you want to do it again and reduce a bit the extension date. And this is where, for example, you would reuse some of the changes that you have already introduced. Next slide. So the preparation, as I said, it's the main part. This is where you will implement the changes that you want in the different tab of the grant agreement that you have already done during the gap. And the system will process that information, will select automatically the relevant clauses that are modified, will list any compulsory supporting document that are requested, like, for instance, the declaration of owner if there is a new beneficiary, or the accession form, or voilà, this type of element that we expect to see. And the IT system also provides some overview and tracking of all the changes, which can be very, very helpful. Next slide. So when you prepare, this is what you get. So basically, it's open again, all the tabs. So what you will do, you will go tab by tab. If, of course, You can, for example, in the same amendment, request for an extension, request for a change of partnership, and request of a change of budget, for instance. So you will have to work on different tabs. Next slide. So for example, that's an example where you need to change the duration. So that's a relatively easy one. So you have the change of duration here that you can put the new duration. Next slide. That's the new beneficiary. So that also seems very simple. So you click on add new beneficiary. This was one consortium, one coordinator, and he has now a requirement to have a new beneficiary. He wants to propose that. So basically, he will enter the data of that beneficiary. You see already here that, of course, this beneficiary must have a PIC. So if the beneficiary doesn't have a PIC, it can't be added at this stage. So this is all the preparation phase. And you have also to have thought, when do we want this beneficiary to start working in the project? So that's the second part on the date. Next slide. So as you see here, the new beneficiary have to sign declaration of owner. I already mentioned that, have to sign the accession form, and all this must be done before the amendment is signed on your side, is submitted. So, and you see here, for example, the IT system prompt, and this is the screenshot on the top, prompt the fact that you have to have a new Annex 1 description of the action. Why? If you have a new beneficiary, this beneficiary have a role. So you have to explain in the new description of the action, the role of that new beneficiary. Seems very logical. As I say also, if you look to the screenshot, the little highlight in purple, this means that if it's highlighted in purple like that, there was a change, new, of course, but also on the active, there wasn't change on the active, the coordinator here. I don't, maybe they have changed something in the related to that specific beneficiary, and the system highlighted. So it helps us also to identify immediately what is modified. Next slide. So this is the place where actually the specific beneficiary will have to sign both the accession form and the declaration. I repeat it. This so to be able to do that, their PIC must be validated. They must have also their project legal signatory assigned. Next slide. So you can change also work packages. So when you have, for example, some heavy change in the activity and the work packages, you can update them. Careful, as we said earlier, we cannot have a new project. Of course, all those changes must not question the award, the fact that we have awarded your project. So here, of course, all those changes must remain in the scope of your project initial objectives and ambition as well. It's really important. Here, as you said, you can add new work package, you can update package, you can remove package. All this, it's possible. Next slide. Alors, for the deliverable, as I said, the date, the date where we expect the deliverable to be submitted, this does not require an amendment. All the other aspects, like the dissemination level, change from public to sensitive, or a really important, or the deletion of the deliverable, or the fact that you change deeply the impact, the description of the deliverable, for example, and that has an impact on how the work package is implemented. All that could be considered as major deviation that would require an amendment. This is where it's a bit of a gray area, and this is where it's really important that you communicate with the monitoring help desk, explaining the situation and say, and most of the time the screening can be that, okay, those changes are minor deviation and do not require an amendment. However, we are informed about that, okay? And you can report that later on in your reports. Next slide. So, as I said, all the changes that you will do in the different tabs, when applicable, will be then reflected in the amendment information tab. This is where you have the overview. This is where you have the clauses, and the clauses are automatically selected, apart from some which we, CINEA, have to select them. But the one on your side will be automatically selected. Very handy. Next slide. So what the system does as well, they constitute the amendment. So it's not paper, so it's IT. So you can see here what is red. What is red is actually what has been included, what has been identified as changes. Like here, it's the change, it's very small. This change of the duration, for example. So it says that the change of duration, it's one of the change. And what you have also, next slide, please. Part of the package, you have the amendment, but you have also the request for amendment. It seems a bit odd, but actually it's a very important aspect. So basically, what you when you sustain your amendment, you do not have to re-explain what are the changes or limit to that, but what you have to do, you have to explain why you have to change. So this justification is really something which is important to work on, to make it concise, but still very complete in the justification of what you propose. For example, you have also to clearly put, let's say, explain us that what you propose do not modify the implementation. Sometimes you have, for example, large changes, but still those changes are required because of a change of context, for instance. And you can justify that despite those changes, could be budget, whatever, partnership, you are still actually fulfilling the objective of your and the ambition of your project. And this is where we will expect you to explain that. Of course, here, if it's very, very long, you can always add a supporting document that will be also added, like a justification, an annex, that you will be also added to your package. So there is a way here to add new document if you really need to explain much more what the reason why you have to have this amendment. Next slide. So as the same logic than the report, what's going on? It's, for example, there are some changes, for example, on some deliverable that could be included by different beneficiary, okay? At one stage, it has to be locked for review for the coordinator to check all the changes that were entered in, okay? So that's really important. This is a step where the coordinator plays its role of coordinator and make sure that what has been potentially put by other beneficiary makes sense. And if the technical monitor are guiding you in the preparation, this they will tell you in the beginning when they will be informed that there is a grant agreement. As we say, we only have that support if it's a complex amendment. And therefore, there is the moment to consult them. So you lock and you do your check and you consider this is good, and you contact the monitor and asking them to review what is locked for review. And here there could be some back and forth between you and the technical monitor before it's submitted to CINEA for the informal review. Next slide. So there we are. So the informal review of CINEA officer is what? Is an informal step. It's not a step where we will tell, okay, we accept your amendment. First, because the CINEA officer, project advisor, financial officer, if there is any change on the financial aspect, are not the one entitled to do that. Actually, it's only the authorizing officer that can say, yes, I accept the changes. He and she they are the person signing the amendment actually. So, but what we can already give you is, okay, it looks like it's complete. It looks like it's admissible as an amendment, that you have put the right justification and all this. We can also say that we don't think the justification is enough. So basically we give an opinion, and of course it's up to you to think about that and do the changes if necessary. Next slide. So that's a bit of the ping pong that we have. So basically we review the amendment request, and of course the request we cannot change anything, it's on our side. And we can ask for revision, you can change, and you can resubmit until we say, okay, and we say that in the system. So basically in the system, we say that you can submit this amendment, and you will get that information very clear. Before you submit, you can always cancel the amendment. And but of course, after you submit, the next slide. So that's the submission. The submission is done by the project the PL sign, so the project legal signatory, the one that might have signed the contract agreement, or another one if you had to change that person in the system. And he does it on behalf, or they do it on behalf of the consortium. It will be a NIF signatory, and there the amendment is completely sealed. No changes is possible. So there is only one signature, but it's already signed. Okay. Next slide. So we assess it. So we assess the amendment. We can, as I say, reject or agree, and we have 45 days to do that. And as I said, you can always withdraw. It's not a cancellation there because it has been signed. It's a withdrawal, and it's only the PL sign that can do that. Of course, is the one signing it, is the one that can withdraw it. Next slide. So what happens in case of rejection? Actually, you will get a letter. So as I said, you can decide to go on with an amendment that the project advisor, for instance, said that it was not sufficiently justified, and that may lead to a rejection. You can still say, no, I want to submit that amendment. Okay, you will submit it, and you may get a rejection letter or not. Next slide. Just a reminder, if it's rejected and you want to think about it and resubmit it, you can always take that amendment and you start it from there to redo your changes. Next slide. So let's be positive, it's accepted. So it's accepted, CINEA sign it. So basically you, not only the coordinator, but I think that all beneficiaries are informed, and that becomes the latest legal data. Next slide. So that's a specific case I want just to highlight because it happens relatively often. It's when a beneficiary is terminating his participation. So it can be voluntarily, as I said in the beginning, a beneficiary doesn't want to work anymore on the project. He informed the coordinating beneficiary, and the coordinator beneficiary has to first convince him to stay, or, okay, already take action. So this requires an amendment. So what is important as well is that when we accept your project, we accept your project also based on the fact that you have the right consortium to implement it. So if you change the consortium, we want to receive the justification or be convinced that you still have the right consortium to implement it. So, however, when you ask and you sign and you submit the fact that one beneficiary is terminated, this is active, effective, even if we refuse the amendment. So the case is that, for example, you consider that there is a key beneficiary. This key beneficiary doesn't want to work anymore, okay? And you consider that you can continue without it. You, as consortium, we disagree, okay? So you submit your amendment as such, and we reject it. In that case, the project is somehow on our side, not anymore in the condition that it can be implemented. However, It's not terminated. The project continues, but we will request you to find a solution, to find an alternative. Meanwhile, the coordinating beneficiary that terminates is still terminated. Next slide. So just one thing. So for example, your beneficiary said in month 6, I don't want to work anymore in that project. Okay, I doesn't have the capacity anymore. He stopped. You take few months trying to convince him to continue. Okay, month 9, you realize, well, this is not possible, and you launch the amendment. So here you have 2 dates which are important. The exit date, so it's the date where the beneficiary said, okay, he actually stopped, so no more cost will be eligible for that beneficiary after the end of work date. And you have the termination date, which is later because you took a few months to try to convince this beneficiary. So those dates are important to put in the system. And on the 24th, we will also discuss a bit more on the consequences of a termination of a beneficiary. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so just for you to know, until you submit the amendment, you can always undo the action. When you have submitted, as I said, the termination is effective. It's not, you can't come back. If you want to come back, you have to redo an amendment, putting this beneficiary back. Okay, so that's just for you to, for us to be on really clear. Next slide. And voila, so just for example, this is, for example, a case again where the system helps you. So the opinion letter of a living beneficiary is a mandatory element that we expect, for example, that you have to put in the document letter, and that will be part actually of the amendment package.